welcome again, everybody. We are sorry for all this hustle. Yeah, I hope you've been enjoying yourselves nevertheless. We had fun, that's what I can say. So welcome to the final presentations of the MIT Hacking Racism Hackathon. And yeah, we know it's the moment you've been waiting for. You've been working towards the last 48 hours, 24/7 probably. And yeah, we'll kick it off now, and we are very excited to see the presentations. Next, please. So we're Track D, and it's our topic is data bias and clinical research and trials. So next, this is us. The five of us: Jesus, David, Kushal, Yusuf, and me. I'm Jutta, as you probably already know. So we had fun, not only doing that picture, but also, yeah, the whole weekend, I would say. And now I will turn over to Yusuf, who will introduce our judges.
Thank you, Jutta. This is Yusuf Enriquez, one of the co-creators of Hacking Racism. Looking forward to hear you guys pitch. It's been a long 2 days, but I've seen the progress with the team. I'd like to introduce you guys to the judges. Let them introduce themselves about a minute each, just to go a little bit in their background and turn it over to the next in the order that is on the screen. So Corinne, if you can introduce yourself for a minute or less, and we can move to the next judge.
Hi, I'm Corinne Reed. I'm CEO of Ellison Laboratories. We work with healthcare providers, payers, as well as the government to leverage artificial intelligence to improve the quality and efficiency of healthcare delivery. That's it. Thanks.
William, I think we'll wait to see if Milton is able to come on board. William?
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is William Wells. I'm the executive director and founder of Esteem Village. The lowercase a is missing in front of STEAM on the slide, but it's all good. It's just glad to be here. I'm really excited to hear what your brilliant young minds have come up with under the tutelage of your mentors and coaches. So let's get it on.
Chris.
So hey everyone, Chris DeLuca. So I'm the global head of digital investments at Sanofi Ventures. So Sanofi Ventures is the venture capital arm of Sanofi, the large 100,000 person French pharmaceutical company. Our goal is to really look at innovative, transformational, digital and data science oriented companies where we can support through venture capital and scale through the size of the organization. Prior to joining Sanofi, I led digital innovation for Johnson & Johnson Innovation and across our innovation centers in J Labs. And before that, I was an entrepreneur and also worked in Novartis for many years. So have always lived at the intersection of finding ways to help either large companies get small through innovation or through ways to help early stage companies get big. And I've been a longtime supporter and fan of everything hacking medicine. So very honored to be included here today.
Great, thank you all. So just to recall the process that you all have been going through, we had the problem pitches on Friday evening, a mix of the team going backwards and forwards, forming, storming, and performing. And finally, you started the hacking. And we had practice pitches twice. You got feedback, you called mentors, and you probably went back and forth, you iterated, and now you're finally here to present. We are very excited for you and for us as well. So quickly on the judging criteria, just to make sure you all got it. It has been presented several times. The judges will look for the impact that you will make on healthcare, on the healthcare system and on public health. They will look for innovation. How innovative is your solution? Yeah, will it work? Is it something new, something that doesn't exist already? So, and they will look for implementation. Yeah, how will it work in practice? Yeah, can it be executed? Is it sustainable, viable, and feasible? And finally, they will also judge on the presentation you give. Yeah, you've had training on that, and yeah, I'm sure, we are sure, you got it all right. So next, please. And that's the last slide before we begin. Just to remind you, when you are about to present, yeah, please unmute yourself. Jesus will tell you who's next, yeah, and yeah, ask your name, but make sure you unmute yourself and say your name again that you will present. If it's two people, please both say hi. You will present for 3 minutes. We have a 5-minute Q&A, yeah, and then we have 2 buffer minutes, which the judges will take also to put in the evaluation. Okay, right. So I would say ready, set, and present. The first team is bias aware.
All right, thank you very much, Jutta. So the presentation, as Jutta said, you have 3 minutes for your pitch. I will cut you after 3 minutes so that everybody has the same chance. And then you will have like a Q&A session for about 5 minutes from the judges. In the chat, you can see the sequence of who's coming next. Yeah, I'm just checking now here if we have it already, put it on the chat. David or Jutta, can you please put the order in the chat so everybody knows who's next?
It is.
It's up.
Yeah, very good. So, all right, bias aware. Whoever wants to present from you, please unmute yourself and go ahead. I'm ready when you are.
Are you in presentation mode, Jesus?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you see if you can get your Windows bar out of the way? Just so it's a little distracting for the team.
Yeah, I can guess, but this is wait a second.
Sorry, everybody.
No problem. I wasn't supposed to present now. I don't know how to get this.
Don't worry about it. It's okay. We can live with it.
It's Helen from Team D009. Just want to make sure you guys can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Just let me know when to start and then I'll get started.
Whatever you want.
Okay. Hey everyone, we're Team Bias Aware. We're looking to build an AI platform for addressing underrepresentation of minorities in cancer clinical research. Next, please. In the healthcare industry, patients are treated very differently based on their race. A research showed that half of white medical trainees believe myths such as Black people have thicker skin or less sensitive nerve endings than white people. Other research showed that healthcare professionals deter from even discussing clinical trials with minority patients due to implicit negative attitudes and what they perceived as good candidates. So these false notions and hidden biases lead to inadequate treatment for minorities and greater healthcare disparities. Next. When we looked at the data across the US, 36% of cancer patients are African American, yet they only represent a staggering 6% of participants in clinical research. Treatment studies in the last decade comprised of 83% white participants, but African Americans carry the greatest cancer burden, but they're not adequately represented. So we looked at why and how these barriers influence how Blacks perceive the enrollment of minority patients and how they communicate. Next. We looked at a multi-level framework of the problem at the system, individual, and interpersonal level. Ultimately, the root of the issue ties to the doctor-patient communication, as this is the primary driver for minorities who don't necessarily always have the resources to do the additional research. It's ultimately the way they decide on agreeing to enroll in the clinical study or not. So we believe that a data-driven solution to produce greater empathy and increase education training would be the right approach. Next. So our solution is an AI platform that brings together multiple streams of data around patient-doctor interaction, disease management databases, customer feedbacks, and clinical trials and notes and reviews to bring awareness to moments in the patient-doctor interaction where implicit bias might occur through an interactive dashboard. So over time, the system would get smarter about the in-the-moment reminders for the doctors to improve their patient interactions, such as, hey, have you talked to Sarah about clinical trial options? Or, hey, Frank might think about treatment differently given their background. So these reminders and training would enable the doctors to better communicate with the minority patient that they're dealing with. And our approach uses a linguistic techniques and federated learning algorithms to train and update the model, targeting increasingly larger and distributed audiences over time. Next. So our data-driven solution drives more empathetic doctor-patient interactions to communicate effectively and build trust in the community. Our goal is to promote inclusivity in clinical research using data to understand the relationship between patients and healthcare experts. The impact is a significant one because it increases the generalization of research findings and targets reducing disparity and access to higher quality healthcare. We hope to increase the enrollment of racial and ethnic minorities in cancer clinical trials by addressing these barriers at multiple levels.
I'm sorry, your 3 minutes are up. Sorry for that.
Yeah.
Right. So, judges, please, your questions.
So I guess, thank you for your presentation. I guess my question is twofold. So what are the main inputs into this model from a data perspective? What are the inputs and what are the outputs? And the secondary question is if we're now in an area in which that we're experiencing bias and the data is biased, what are you doing to make sure that whatever AI solution doesn't exacerbate existing biases?
Yeah, so what we believe was missing around the enrollment for cancer treatment is basically a system that is able to mine all the data from both disease management databases, but also the transcriptions from patient-doctor interaction and customer feedback and demographics, all sort of as different levels of input into the system. And ultimately, as an output, we'd be able to create a recommendation system for the doctors in order to use certain words or certain guidelines that help them communicate better with the patients. So these are the various inputs to the whole process of the interaction to what the eligibility requirements are, but also being able to pair all of that together into one algo to understand, from a demographics perspective, how to best translate that back into the doctor-patient interaction.
So, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, so great presentation, first of all. Every problem has a root cause, right? And so I guess my question to the team is, do you feel that your solution addresses the root cause? And if so, what do you see as the root cause and how does your solution address it?
If I may take that. So the root cause today we're seeing is the trust issue between patients and doctors, as well as even for enrollment into clinical trials. African-American people are saying that the research shows I wouldn't mind joining clinical trials if I'm not treated as a guinea pig. And so this is fundamentally at the trust issue. Patients are thinking, do the doctors have the best interest in my interest in mind? And also, do the doctors understand my maybe ethnic backgrounds and my preference in different treatment? Like as an Asian person, I may think about death planning in a very different way. And so this platform basically brings, mines all the data and then shows where there's disparity in the kind of treatment plan and care time that's being allocated by maybe ethnic background or by socioeconomic backgrounds. And so that's what the dashboard view can provide. And over time, AI system can get smarter in providing more culturally sensitive, relevant recommendations for doctors to provide more inclusive, culturally sensitive interaction for patients.
Okay, perfect. And so the root cause you see is trust, correct? And there's obviously lack of trust, and it's going upstream, right? From the patient to the healthcare provider or the doctor, right? And there's several reasons for that. History will point that out. So I guess I need to know, as far as transparency and addressing that trust, how does the patient build trust? How do they access or they see this transparency that will enable them to have trust?
So,
And that's my last question. Sorry.
yeah, so in our research, we found that one of the main, one of the root causes on the patient's perspective is how they perceive the clinical trials and whether they're being communicated to. In minorities, for example, the doctors are spending significantly less time explaining what these clinical trials are about and how to get them to enroll. So it's all about the communication in terms of building trust and really understanding what is going on. And part of it is financials, logistics, and various stages along the way in getting them to enroll is all around the doctor-patient interaction and how they communicate that to the patient. And a lot of times it's lacking empathy, which is why they're not enrolling. So the way our system would be addressing that is to improve that, communication layer so that the minorities understand what they're signing up for.
Is the data science component of this, so where you have this machine learning system really taking new kinds of data, as I understand, and sort of training it to be more bias aware, and as that's happening, it's clear to me that you're using that as a method to then enhance the communication aspect between the patient and physician. Is that actually the have you considered other factors, and is it pure data that's really driving that behavior and that sort of weak communication, and is that the necessary step? And sort of what have you done to sort of prove out just actually the theory that better data is going to automatically change the trust factor?
Well, the way we intend to measure this would be obviously over time. And we would need to look at metrics in terms of customer feedback, whether the patients are, whether minority patients are indeed enrolling over time. But we do believe that because of the lack of knowledge and the lack of awareness of the availability of these clinical studies is in fact a hindering factor from them participating. So just by being able to, communicate the facts better and tell them what they're eligible for consideration, and getting the doctors to say it in a way where it encourages them to really consider this alternative. We believe that, these are the data points that we'll see in getting better over time.
Any sense of where your first training set of data might come from?
I can take that. So we're looking at maybe a really great partner can be telemedicine partners, because we're seeing increasing usage of telemedicine, and with everything becoming more digitized, there's more data points there. So for example, we can look at EMR record, which already has like the follow through frequency, the treatment time, like per visit, the user patient demographics. But with telemedicine, we can also track like the video and the facial expression, especially looking at micro-expression, that can help us look into maybe patient sentiment analysis tracking, right? So we're seeing there's weakness in the healthcare system does not have very robust patient feedback link it right now to really track per visit how satisfied the patient is. And we think if we start with telemedicine, then we have some interesting data. For example, the tone and voice of the doctors during that treatment, like how empathic is it? There's already AI technology that can enable us with doing that kind of detection.
Thank you very much. So the time's up for your question. Thank you. Great presentation. And let us give a few moments to the judges so that they can finalize entering the opinion and evaluation. And the next is Evolve, which I think is already here.
Awesome. Again, judges, just make sure you mark team 28 on the drop down on your forms.
Right. All right, so then let us start. Thank you very much, Team Evolve, for being here today with us. And I'm ready when you are.
Great. Next. Meet Vanessa, healthy 30-year-old diabetic. When she pushed back against the sugar test, she had went to 1 to 2 times a week, and they said, "You're not being treated well. You're not compliant." Next. There is unequal treatment in how pregnant women are treated and by race. Next. We are building a clinical decision support tool to help physicians on nuances and complexities to overcome implicit bias and incomplete data sets when treating. Doctors may not spend time and there are disparities in treatment. Next. We're going to create a system where you give it to minority hospitals, use the EMR and evaluate data. Next. And then we're going to run that through and also look at it by disease conditions. Next.
So basically what happens is that the EMR and structured and unstructured data would be taken. Other important data like ethnicity, the grouping, the race, and the zip code, etc., would be taken. The symptoms of the patient would then be entered, and successful cases where correct diagnosis has occurred in the past would then be received, and a data set would then be created, and the different symptoms would then be linked to the different ethnic groups in a cloud that would exist. Next. This is what the hospital could then see. Okay, so for the hospital, how would it occur is that the minority hospitals would be a major target. So in the minority hospitals, the nurse would enter the patient details like the ones which we got from the EMR. Then the symptoms would then be entered by the doctor. Caucasian symptoms and the correlation to the disease is already prevalent. However, minority isn't. So from the database, the patient details would then be matched, and the symptoms with the symptoms and the probable diseases would then be given, and the doctor could then take the appropriate action. Next. So that would cover our phase 1, and the phase 1 would go on for approximately 2 years. Then we would come to phase 2. The phase 2 would be a chatbot where the patient would enter the details himself and the symptoms. We believe that the hospitals that have taken part in the clinical trials of phase 1 before would have a better understanding of the problems that are faced when it comes to diagnosis of the minority communities. So then we would connect the hospitals from the phase 1 trials, as well as patients from the same ethnic group who have suffered and who have been treated properly in the past. So this patient could then book an appointment with any one of these people, and an appointment would then be scheduled, and the patient would get appropriate one-on-one decisions, which would help the patient of the minority community trust the healthcare system more. Next. Our business model would include buyers from the insurance companies, the hospitals, and the patients would also pay for our services. Next. Already such things exist when it comes to Epic database.
I am sorry, you have passed the time. Sorry for that. Okay. 3 seconds.
However, this does not occur in minority.
I will give a few seconds to see if this is the final slide, but yeah, okay.
That's the final slide.
Thank you very much.
That's the final slide. So we hope to overcome clinical racism by using clinical decision support tools. So this is our team.
Thank you. Judges, please, your questions.
I think somewhere on the slide I said you had a classification model. What is this classification model actually classifying?
Sure. So basically, the classification model classifies the different conditions which would be required and which we think are necessary when doctors take decisions to the symptoms and correlate it to the disease. So the different things that we would focus on are the age, the gender, the race, the ethnicity, and the fact and the zip code of the people, because in how it exists in the US, we realize that the symptoms are shown differently for different minority groups. So we would want to focus on the different conditions which could lead about to different symptoms and a misjudgment of the particular disease in minority.
I think you had a slide in there that we didn't get a chance to get to around business model. So I'd love to hear just thoughts on how you were thinking about that.
Sure. Wendy, would you like to address that?
Yeah. So there's what we had talked about was we said, who's going to buy it? We said insurance companies and hospitals. What we notice is Johns Hopkins has created this wonderful data catalog only for their own patients, and minority hospitals don't have the same luxury of that. So we wanted to create the software that allowed them to use their in-house data to create a similar system so they could change their approaches for treating minority populations. So that's the one piece about the buyer. Of course, the insurance companies are going to benefit because they can use it to take better care of their patients through wellness programs. They could get insights early on. And then we also thought that the patients will pay less and the hospitals will gain as well. So that's the value in the system. Is that helpful?
Yep, thank you.
So my question is, I have two questions. The first question is, what is that mission statement or the tagline that would describe your product? And very simple, what is it? And that's going to pique me to want to dive deeper.
Remove racial discrimination in healthcare by better understanding the patients and their problems and symptoms.
Okay, and secondly, what do you define as a, I've heard you mention minority hospitals. What's your definition of a minority hospital?
What we've noticed is that there are big hospitals and they treat a lot of patients, but many minority patients don't show up in bigger hospitals. They show up in smaller institutions.
So
Okay.
hospitals basically where a minority or an ethnic group, which is not the mainstream Caucasian group, would go, like the BMC hospitals, would be our major focus. Like more than 40 or 50% of the people who go to that hospital are not Caucasians. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I asked that question because here in Kansas City, we're separated by a state line. We have Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas. And the funny thing is that where the urban core is and the minority populations are, there are no hospitals. They've moved the hospitals out west. So there's a you know, when you're talking about stroke, the sooner you get to a hospital and get care, the higher your rate of survival, right? So the hospitals, they are big hospitals, but they're not in the areas where minority population exists. And I would probably say that's probably true in most of our cities in the United States because hospitals are going where the funding is, right? Where the funds and the tax base is. So just something to consider as you guys dig deeper. Love your presentation. It's very clean, it's very sharp, but just dig deeper.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Judges, other questions? All right.
Great. So judges, we're going to give you about a minute to put your form in. If you want to move to the next slide, Jesus, we're going to give you guys into the welcome slide for the next one. Yeah, there we go. So just remember, you just saw Team Evolve, who was Team 28. Please go to your forms and fill that out. If you need time to catch up with the previous one as well, please do so. You have about a minute, and Empower, you guys are up. So Team 5, get ready. Thank you, guys.
And another note from me, if a team wants 30 seconds to go warning, please say so before you start. I'm happy to give that to you. It's up to you if you want it.
All right, then let us call for Empower. Empower, are you here?
Yes, I am.
All right, so I am ready when you are.
Empower yourself. Get in the know. It's common for Black, Indigenous, people of color to mistrust research, but we trust our peers, our friends, and our aunties. We're going to encourage BIPOC patients to participate in clinical trials through trust and accessibility. I'm Alejandra, and as a Concert Clinical Trials Coordinator, I have the privilege of recruiting patients. Some patients are apprehensive about what their experience might be as people of color, and they have a right to mistrust. Next, which is why we're creating Empower, a social enterprise to leverage existing community relationships and culture to dispel misinformation through our responsive web platform. Our goal is to increase the number of BIPOC participants in clinical trials. Next. Currently, we have 47 new cancer trials approved as of December 2019. Unfortunately, less than 5% of those participants were African American. Next. Our social enterprise Empower will focus on trust and accessibility. The best way to do this is through people from the community teaching the community. We will train culturally sensitive community health workers to use Empower videos as an educational guide to build trust in local dialects. Empower videos will have peer conversations about clinical trials, addressing the dark history of research and discussing their rights as participants. We'll also highlight real clinical trial participants of color to share their story and why they chose to participate. Additionally, we'll host Reddit AMAs with TikTokers and other influencers to motivate patients to ask their deepest questions. Next, we'll partner with robust corporations like Livongo, Taito, and Roundtrip to provide remote monitoring for clinical trials and transportation for rural and marginalized communities. Next, these are our partners. As we expand to other clinical trials, we'll keep the social enterprise style. With sustainability in mind, we will leverage TikTokers and influencers to generate a lot of positive attentions for stakeholders and large corporations. Next. And this is our team, Team D5, ready to empower and answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alejandra. Thank you very much. All right, judges, your questions, please.
I have no questions. I just have a statement that you guys did. You put a lot in as far as thinking it through. So that's really good. Do you have you mentioned about sustainability, following the patient, following the outcomes? Are you doing that? You did mention that in the slide presentation. Is that correct?
Yes, we did. We want to make sure that this is a program that can not only be started in one city, but replicated across the country in different cities.
Yeah, I would like to echo that. Really good grasp of the problem and really good presentation. So one other thing that I really liked is how you're talking about get very culturally responsive, that folks are listening to folks that are like them and understand them and things like that. So have you also thought of a kind of an additional a step of personalization and how you could further use technology to further personalize it, as you really have done a good job of making it personalized and contextualized? But you know, how else could you use technology to make that impact even further?
Yeah, so
oh, go for it.
Okay, sorry. So one of the points, maybe then Alejandra can go. So one of the points to make personalized is that it would more be peer-to-peer based and in local dialects. So like the people of their community understand more easier way, like from their surroundings only. Like other points, maybe Alejandra. Yeah.
In public health, we have what are called digital stories. So we use different media with music that can be, again, culturally relevant, and just different ways to take in similar information, as we understand that everybody learns things a little bit differently. And not everybody is you know, able to read or write. So we want to make sure that people are able to take in that information in several ways.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to ask a little bit. I mean, I think it's a really great concept. I love, you know, the community approach to this. It feels very personal, even if it's, you know, there are plenty of opportunities for personalization. Just when you have multiple networks and lots of integration points, you know, had the team had a chance to consider sort of an implementation plan, like how might you begin? Where would your first, you know, Monday comes and what would you do next? Where do you begin with this?
Yeah, so I'm currently at one of the coordinators for a multi-site study across the nation. We have 25 hospitals, and we've trained all of the research coordinators. And one of my mentors, she actually runs ECANA, which is a national network for endometrial cancer in African-American women. So we would take that model where we would reach out to different community leaders and train them so that they can disseminate the information.
And we were thinking about possibly, maybe start on the West Coast, somewhere like Seattle, and do it like maybe just the SeaTac area, and then start growing out maybe Portland, and go down the West Coast and then move forward, or maybe on the East Coast, do a West Coast, East Coast at the same time or something.
So, I mean, is it fair to say you view this as as a true training platform? And how do you think of, everything else you could do to it from from a technology perspective? So beyond pushing education, there's so much data and so much interaction that will be generated through the platform itself. So I'm curious, have you considered, beyond the training, which is obviously the fundamental benefit here, there's so much.
Beyond the training, one more thing which we were actually considering was also the accessibility factor. Like this factor is tackling mistrust through training, but also the factor of the accessibility. Like the people in the marginalized communities are much in the remote areas, and they coming into the mainstream media, that becomes very difficult for them, and they face very much hardship. So that's the reason we will try to partner with organizations like Levango, which actually offer remote monitoring, so that the follow-up could be done remotely, and that's really very helpful for the guys to stay in their houses and stay in their places and get more of the transparency and the trust factor will build gradually.
Abbas, I am positive that you gave us a very good explanation and answered Chris's question, but we could not understand or hear it because it came off almost robotic. Can you shorten that and type it into the chat so that we can see it? Or one of your teammates can answer? Because I'm sure you guys worked on it together. Sorry about that.
Thanks, William.
Yeah, so actually, I would just like to add, part of really, partnering with large pharmaceutical companies, for example, who have their corporate social arms, and at the same time going with this different, benefit ventures, which what we do is really leveraging our relationships with these social media influencers in enhancing our presence, and at the same time, the companies, our partners' presence as well.
Can you guys hear me now? Am I audible clear now?
No, not really, Abbas. Sorry, not really. So guys, okay, sorry, Abbas. So guys, Joseph, please, one last question.
Okay, nobody's saying something, so I'm not saying anything, so I'll go. Root cause. Root cause. What is the root cause that your project, your solution is solving?
We're trying to increase the amount of BIPOC population into clinical trials, not just for cancer, but for all clinical trials, and try to get that number up. And to do that, you have to be able to deal with the mistrust and make them understand that the history is there, yes, but you don't have to there's been safeguards put in place, and you need to understand that those are there, and they're not just going to use as guinea pigs.
Great answer. And how much time did your team put into actually going back and looking historically at where the cause of the mistrust happened?
Yeah, it's been numerous experimentations on people of color, from Tuskegee to the forced sterilization of Latina women. And we're not talking centuries ago. We're talking in the 70s. We're talking in the detention centers only last month. It's still happening. And eugenics movement, it's still alive and well. White supremacy is happening right now. Structural racism is happening right now. So this is very relevant, and absolutely there is a lot of reasons to mistrust, and this is what we're fighting. This is why we're trying to revolutionize the clinical trials pathway for patients to make sure that people of color are represented in these studies.
Awesome. Awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys. All right, so then let us go to the next team, Team Oasis. And please, judges, take a moment and enter your last comments about Empower. And then we will move to Oasis Team 15.
Hey, Jesus, can you give me the team number for the one that just presented, please? I'm sorry.
That was no problem. Team 5.
Are you able to hear me? Just wanted to
Yes.
check. Thank you.
How's everybody doing? Can I be heard?
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, awesome.
All right, I'm ready when you are.
We are Oasis, a diverse group of multi-talented experts who have developed a unique model to bring digital power to the people. Next. Like personalized medicine, Oasis will personalize management of individual health data using a peer-to-peer transactional model. This will help to build trust, transparency, and equity in healthcare for people of color. Next.
Because of these factors, our solution is unique because it's people-led, with a heavy focus on advocacy, stakeholder engagement, paired with participant adoption and learning. We are able to maximize trust within this ecosystem in the acquisition, distribution, and quality of healthcare data while creating positive outcomes in communities of color. Next. With regards to stakeholder engagement, it's a critical component of our solution. It requires all stakeholders in the ecosystem to collaborate to understand value in the participant ecosystem. Also, by identifying supply chains and operating models, as well as the risks and constraints that these communities face in technology adoption. Next. With respects to participation adoption, we understand that outreach, education, as well as demos and content distribution will drive our success. Informing and incentivizing participants to use the application will also be an important factor. Next.
The Oasis business model is using a beachhead strategy with Baltimore City as our first point of attack. Baltimore is reflective of all key challenges due to racial disparities, i.e. education, quality of life, and healthcare. Market penetration strategies include mobile healthcare provider engagement where food deserts are located, and collaboration with local stores and community organizations. Market expansion will be a direct result of revenue generated by the subscription service and seed funding. Success in Baltimore is predictive of success in other major markets such as Washington, D.C. and Richmond, and can easily be scaled and is sustainable. Next. There is a return on investment for all stakeholders. More importantly, healthcare systems and sponsored companies will have a direct feed of patient demographics to better control and utilize these data for recruitment into clinical trials without the exorbitant cost of the middleman, i.e. CROs. Next. The Oasis team is ready to take on this endeavor and has decades of experience in clinical research, strategy, technology, and finance. Our ask is for seed funding for app development and startup in Baltimore and Series A funding for market expansion. Our next step is clear. Believe Oasis is not a mirage. Next. Thank you for the opportunity to present our model and our change for increasing racial diversity in clinical trials.
Thank you so much, Oasis. Very good. Thank you very much. All right, judges, your questions, please. Who wants to start?
Sum it up in a mission statement. Just what do you do? Real short and simple. Sweet. I'm just now connected to the internet, and I need to know why I need your service.
So our mission is to make sure that participants are connected to what available clinical trials are currently underway, but under the supervision of their healthcare professional. So we connect the client to the doctor who then can help them, guide them through the clinical trial to make sure that it's appropriate, timely, and it will impact their life individually.
Thank you.
Is this a platform that you would imagine, would you sell it into physicians in their practice, or who do you think as the buyer in this case?
So the buyer, I don't know if we can go back to slides.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, so the buyers are actually the pharmaceutical companies, as well as other community organizations who want to make sure that the patients are actually participating in these clinical trials.
So in addition, you'd also have the government agencies, you have the pharmaceutical companies themselves, as well as pretty much everybody who is wants to participate in having transparency and consensus throughout the process.
So obviously as a pharmaceutical buyer, if I'm in that seat, how would I think about differentiation now? If I have now entrepreneurs knocking on the doors to say, hey, this is a better way to increase diversity in clinical trials, how might I sort of evaluate this from a competitive advantage or a differentiator?
Sure,
Yeah.
because go ahead. Okay, so there are many clinical trials that actually currently do not incorporate diverse population. So when, especially for pharmaceutical companies, if a drug is released, there is that criteria where if it starts to negatively affect people, there's these withdrawal or recalls. And so having people of diverse backgrounds in the clinical trials can save millions of dollars to pharmaceutical companies who don't have to worry about now drug recalls because they've actually tested, a broader range of people.
But one double click on that would be if side by side, if there's another innovation sort of startup company that's also pitching, enhanced diversity in clinical trials. My question to you is: so we all acknowledge that there's a problem here. So to other competitors who are also tackling this exact same problem, why your company, why blockchain is going to be an enabling feature? Why this distributed network? Sort of the secret sauce in what you built here.
I don't think that so much is blockchain, but blockchain is just an enabler. It enables us to actually have a format, something that people understand. It's clear, it's distributed. It's also just a log of the entire process. Let's call it the participant journey. However, what's really our differentiator and competitive advantage is our ability to actually execute. The larger companies actually can't really do this just because they don't have the connections that we have in the community. Being in Baltimore, being HBCU students, having relationships with Hopkins and Care First and all the other organizations, not to mention our own individual community organizations, which includes D9, fraternal and Masonic organizations, basically the community, the churches, the Black churches, keep going. The list goes on. So that's really where we have, and because of those networks and connections, we can actually trickle down to other and provide that model and create that model with other organizations. So I think that's really where we really differentiate with someone just saying, hey, we can do this and this is an app, that's great. But what we can do is say, that was no shade, by the way. That was no shade at all.
Yeah, let me just add to that we are going to use these food deserts, right? Where we know there's a correlation between the health disparities, in these communities. And so by sending in these mobile units, we're actually going to be able to bring in investigators, actual physicians who look like those communities, the people in those communities. That's something, and I work in pharma too. That's something that we are not really getting, having success with, and to be quite transparent. I think this is, while there's a push, there's been some progress made, but unlike pediatric research where there's actual language, legislature that puts teeth in it, there's nothing around racial diversity. There's just the FDA guidance. And we feel that this makes our model very unique because we'll have some sweat equity. We'll actually build the relationships because it's the human piece of this that really will drive and build the trust in these communities.
And Angela, can you speak to the exclusivity as really being and how we're using data?
Sure. So, with pediatric clinical development over the years, As I mentioned, the legislature has, and just recently there's been a revision to the Race for Children's Act, such that, not in a recent revision, but what's allowed companies or really motivated companies to really do pediatric drug development is the 6 months exclusivity when it comes to market exclusivity. And so no company can come in and genericize that compound. There's a 6 month exclusivity piece that allows them to, really commercially have a hold on the market for that component. We can see, using that footprint to really do something similar when it comes to racial diversity. And I think COVID-19 has really put a highlight on the disparity and the need for racial diversity in these trials. It's going to be extremely difficult to recruit people of color into these trials. Not only that, to sell that vaccine or get people of color to actually take the vaccine. So I think we're at the right time with the right model.
Have you considered any kind of data-driven approaches to help patients in particular get connected with trials for which they might be most successful based on their background or genomic makeup or things like that?
Yeah, that's what the algorithm does. It actually searches the clinical trial database and then connects that based on the metadata that we receive from our clients to make sure that the clinical trials that they're talking to with their physicians actually match their demographic.
All right, thank you very much. 10 minutes are up. So by the way, sorry, it seems to be that you asked for one of these slides here. Acoustically, I couldn't hear you. I had a break here. I had the whole day. Anyway, thank you so much, Oasis. And then we give a few moments to the judges so that they enter the last comments into the forms. And the next one is No Trust, Team 1. And we just had the Team 15, Oasis.
Okay, I'm starting now.
Yeah.
We are Team No Trust, and we are moving from no trust to no trust by increasing transparency and trust for BIPOC in clinical trials. Next. Clinical research and trials do not adequately include BIPOC. A study was done on cystic fibrosis clinical trials in 2015. Only 15% were found to be BIPOC. Next. My experience with clinical trials is sources from my grandmother who has Alzheimer's. When I found out that she had Alzheimer's, our entire family started looking for clinical trials all over the world. And instead of finding out what would actually happen to her in these clinical trials, we were overwhelmed by monetary compensation, which we were not interested in. Eventually, we decided to keep her at home because we felt that keeping her with Alzheimer's was more predictable than sending her for a clinical trial. Bad experiences like the one I had with my grandmother aggravate the problem of lack of trust and result in decreased participation in clinical trials by BIPOC. Next. The No Trust Service solution is using BIPOC leaders and people who are trusted in BIPOC communities to advertise clinical trials. The medical device companies and healthcare providers are the clinical stakeholders in the system because they have the most to benefit from increased BIPOC participation and can diversify their recruiting process. Next.
So the overall goal here is we need to have that proper representation of the BIPOC population when it comes to the clinical trials, but how do we do it? So we came up with the 3-pillar approach. The center pillar is about transparency. Basically, we need to be more open about the risk and benefits of a clinical outcome. By learning that expect will bring that element of trust back. The rightmost pillar is about accessibility. How do we do it? Basically, we need to provide means to get into the trial. Some population in remote areas, they don't even know they exist. And if they are, then there's complex legal language involved. It needs to be more simpler, plain English. The leftmost pillar is about the BIPOC partners. So identify partners which are out there who want to do the right thing. So we came up with the BIPOC project here. Basically, the idea here is we are expanding our network and have more representatives from the BIPOC population. Next slide, please. So what's our value proposition? So the items on the right, that's the deliverables. So for the BIPOC population, we are bringing that element of trust. We are improving the outcomes. For a medical device company who is performing these clinical trials, basically we're bringing the element or the attention to the SDG or the DEI for that matter. They want to create solution for human-centered thinking, and that's what we're going to provide. And last but not least, the clinical research, they already have funding set aside to perform these trials. And that's the element we're going to try to basically get that piece of the share. Next slide, please. So to summarize, basically, we help BIPOC communities to move from no trust in clinical care to no trust and no care. Our team is here to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, judges, your questions, please.
I don't have a question. I just want to give you guys, I like the way you took no trust from negative and went to no trust as a positive. That was pretty clever. Like what you guys are doing. I have no questions though.
Thank you.
Any thoughts on how you might approach clinical validation? I mean, it's sort of a broad question for everyone, but how you think about, sort of validating as we go through these models and we start to, find technological solutions to enhancing trust. How might we validate this? Any concepts around that?
Sure, that's a very good question. So it could be as simple as, first we need to start with, we need to know where we are at today. So you need to define at a unbiased level where, like, paint a clear picture in terms of what's happening today. And as you're making progress, you need to record where we are going. So understand the picture where we are today, develop that future vision, and create those milestones, and have those checks built in throughout those milestones to make sure that we are moving in the right direction. And if we're not, then the strategy needs to pivot and figure out what else we can do better. And the key element here is we need representatives of BIPOC population speaking for them. We shouldn't be speaking on their behalf. The leaders from their communities should be speaking on their behalf.
I just wanted to add on to that because I think it's a very good question. In these BIPOC communities, there's two really problems. There's the accessibility and then there's the trust. So when you have someone who's respected and trusted and known in that BIPOC community actually address a clinical trial and tell people about it, the BIPOC community is going to be more likely and more receptive to the idea of joining this clinical trial and learning more about it. So in that way, you're helping diversify the patients that will be recruited.
Very helpful. Maybe I'll build one more question onto the back of that. I mean, as we think of, in some ways, lead generation for clinical trials, which we could look at, this is the earliest, sort of step in the funneling process. How have you considered sort of the feedback loop? So once the trial happens, how might you learn from performance of the routing and the lead generation, and sort of, did we send the best candidates to the best trials, and how are their outcomes, and how do we sort of continue to sort of train and learn from that loop that you're building out there?
Right. Anushka, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure, Ankush. So basically what we're trying to target here is, as we've discussed before, that many of the algorithms that are being developed these days have racial bias. And that's not specifically on purpose, that's due to the fact that we don't actually have a diverse data set. Yeah. So because the people from the BIPOC communities are not coming up for trials, we don't actually we don't know how to approach their problems. The solutions which are being developed, they're not being tested on everyone, and hence they're not as effective as they can be if everyone is included. And as and when we start this, we obviously it's not going to happen in a day or in a week or even in a month. It will take time and it will happen gradually. But gradually, as we proceed towards this, we'll have more people coming up for trials. We'll have a better data set, and we'll be able to develop better algorithms which actually include everyone, and it will actually target minimizing racial bias. And once we are able to develop a much better algorithm, I think that will certainly help us in considering our next steps or our future steps, basically.
Yes, it's really good that you're mentioning kind of the bias in data science. And I really think there's two components: is bias in the data, then bias in the practitioners. How do you continue to recruit and retain a diverse data science workforce just kind of me personally, you know, it can be a very challenging environment. So how do you make sure that you also have diverse practitioners to ensure that because the bias comes both ways, both from the practitioners and from the data. So what can be done to kind of address that piece as well?
Like I completely agree with your point, and in fact we had this entire discussion over these 2 days because we certainly felt that because there is a lack of BIPOC researchers in this field, so that certainly adds on to this problem. So people basically feel more uncomfortable, like when you enter a room and you see there are all white people around you. Like even I might feel a bit apprehensive for a moment because I don't feel comfortable in an environment where no one is even remotely linked to me. So that is one problem. I completely agree with your point. And we also were able to find some articles which were able to highlight that this happens because many of the grant reviewers do not represent the BIPOC communities, and hence when researchers are actually hired, the number of BIPOC researchers are less. The number of grants they receive are less. So it's not something we can target as a very small team because it involves people it involves people at very high levels. So we cannot target that individually, but it's a process which does need to be, we need to take care of that. We need to take care of the fact that we have more BIPOC researchers, we have more people at the clinical trial places who are actually there for the samples. And we're not trying to promote like segregation, like we need BIPOC researchers for BIPOC patients. We're trying to promote equality or a blend, so that when a person walks into a room, we see people of various ethnicities and no one feels like cornered. They feel comfortable to go ahead and share details about what they're going through, the symptoms, or certain things about the trial.
I also wanted to add on to Anushka's point that, of course, with this small team, to get to the point where you're holding clinical research and clinical trials is a long, long journey. Almost a decade of education, which is not very easy. And what we recognize that, and that's what we aim to do through partnering with the BIPOC Project. So they cultivate leaders in BIPOC communities, and by using those leaders as our representatives to advertise clinical trials, we create an intermediary between the clinical trial physicians and the BIPOC community, in which they do get a sense of familiarity at a level that we can control. Because although controlling which people are hired for clinical research is out of our range, we can do our best to create an intermediary where they feel more familiarity. Rather than seeing a flyer on a board, they can put, oh, so-and-so said something about this clinical trial in my community. There's someone who's really respected and I trust them a lot. Maybe it's worth giving this some thought and checking it out.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you. We would like to thank all the mentors, sponsors, and organizers. On the next slide, we just had a little thank you for this wouldn't be possible without a lot of people helping us along the way. So thank you very much for everyone who helped us.
And I love your offices, by the way, team. That you are the first team to do that. That is awesome. First of all, your grandma's super adorable, and the offices are just an awesome touch. Good job, guys.
Nice. Thank you very much, Team One. So that was No Trust for the judges, Team 1, and now Bias Via Trap is coming, Team 12.
Yes, we are here. Just let us know when to start. I know the judges are filling out forms and stuff.
Yes, give just a few moments. And great point. All right, I'm ready when you are.
Okay. Now imagine being a Black man, having high blood pressure, and waiting in line just to hear a white man with the same condition get better benefits than you, watching your life flatline before your eyes. Next slide.
Hospitals and insurers use algorithms to help manage healthcare for about 200 million people in the United States each year. The algorithm assigns risk scores to patients on the basis of total healthcare costs accrued in 1 year. This risk score is then used for pain assessment and treatment recommendations for such as high blood pressure. The current standard for pain assessment and management is The hospital has defined criteria to screen, assess, and reassess pain that is consistent with the patient's age, condition, and ability to understand. The hospital then treats the patient's pain or refers the patient for treatment. Black patients tend to receive lower risk scores because their overall healthcare costs are the same as healthier white patients. Thus, the care provided to Black patients costs an average of $1,800 less per year than the care given to a white patient with the same number of chronic health problems. Only 17.7% of patients that the algorithm assigned to receive extra care were Black. The researchers calculate that the proportion would be 46.5% if the algorithms were unbiased. Next. Our solution is to create a unit test to act as an audit that assesses the accuracy of risk scores calculated by medical machine learning software. We will evaluate the healthcare metrics used in the algorithms to flag variables that implicate bias. We will test the data from past patient profiles to not risk harming current patients. We will then provide feedback on the risk score calculation algorithm to the company on how the algorithm shows bias and what other variables to use instead to create more accurate risk scores. If other variables than healthcare costs were used to calculate a person's medical needs in a revised algorithm, bias can be reduced by 84%. Next. We want to work with companies that sell this risk prediction software to hospitals. Optimum is a company that has worked with researchers to fix the bias in their risk prediction algorithms, which shows interest in the market. We can work with another company called Philips and their algorithm, Sentry Care. It is a predictive algorithm for the intensive care unit that shows a patient's probability of receiving an intervention within 60 minutes. After we evaluate and correct the bias in their algorithm, we can potentially save hospitals and insurers preventable costs by ensuring equitable treatment recommendations. Other incentives include greater consumer trust and higher quality product. For example, reducing disparities in effective asthma treatment by 10% for African American workers could save more than $1,600 per person annually in medical expenses and cost of missed work. The clinical impact of these outcomes include better assessment and management of prevalent conditions in populations of color. Next. We are a multinational, multicultural team with eclectic technical backgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, judges, please, your questions.
I think this is really well presented and an important topic. So I see a lot of AI models in industry, and often they're not really talking about how they're testing them and whether they work on diverse populations. I think this is definitely kind of a really important topic. And I liked also how, while it's very altruistic, you kind of tied it to the cost savings that payers would have by having more accurate data across this population. So it was good also kind of connecting the business model to the healthcare payer. So good work.
Awesome.
Yeah, I agree with Decorn. I really like the fact that they're really trying to put something out to check the existing programs that have the biases built into them. So I love you guys' concept and a great presentation, and love the diversity of your team. Good job.
Thank you, appreciate it.
I really like the concept of the score. I think obviously there is risk in exacerbating the bias through a single number or a single sort of calculation. However, plenty of opportunity in that. Could you talk a little bit more? You mentioned it, but talk a little bit more about what sort of action plan they might put into place now once they know sort of the as-is model or where they're at when they get that snapshot.
Sorry, I didn't really get that. Could you repeat yourself?
As I understood the presentation, really being able to understand performance is important. Really being able to provide a service where you're able to calculate in some way is going to be an important eye opener. This is an important step forward, and being able to come up with some sort of action plan associated with that, I think, is an opportunity area as you think of your platform. So could you, if that's true the way I've described it, how might you help bring them along once a score has been built? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we hoped with our audit, we will have, like Corinne had mentioned before, we kept in mind that there is dated bias and also dated software developers that are, because everyone has implicit biases. And we hope to use the audit and then determine if there are variables that do implicate bias, such as like the healthcare costs, and then provide that as feedback. And so, because one company will provide this software for many hospitals, so if we do this with lots of companies' softwares, we hope to expand our impact.
Yeah, so I want to add a little bit to that. So we are going to develop the unit test using some Python code, which is going to go through the various layers of the machine learning model to be able to pick out maybe what particular weights are assigned to specific variables in the model. So this would be able to enable us identify the particular variables that are actually leading to this bias. And the output from our model is going to help us to decide on how we are going to approach these companies that are developing these softwares and let them know that this is the step where they are facing these challenges and these are the steps they could take to resolve it as well. So we tend to open source the code after development and these companies can use it as well.
I think that's a fundamental piece to the sort of successful implementation of this is completing the experience. So as you think of whether it's a financial audit or a tax audit, just like a large organization would audit anything, being able to, just take even a simple example as a Fitbit, we talk about the wearables and how you get some sort of quantification number, you get, whatever, 10,000 steps a day. What are your goals? So how are you getting there? And, what the biggest gap around like sort of wearable abandonment is the lack of the action or the next step. So once you get the number, what are you going to do about it? So I like the way you've described how this could then bring someone along and then start to work that into sort of an action plan, and organizations will very much resonate with that because it's a familiar, value proposition. So well done.
Right. If I can add to that, Chris, I'm sorry. So we're thinking of having like an open source GitHub profile to have our codes, have our answers and our scripts and our models in one place, so that we could have our numbers, our results in an analytics kind of a dashboard or a Tableau dashboard, and present our risk metrics or our scores, basically as an audit agency or a risk assessment agency. So that's the plan, what we have for the results.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great job, guys. Honestly, this is excellent.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone that has helped us.
I'm very proud of you, Tian, and your team. Great job. All right, let's, Jesus, are you there?
Yeah. Go ahead. Or is there, the judges, do you have a last question? All right, let us move. Thank you very much, Bias Bia. And that was Team 12. And the next one, HBCU Trust. So are you here, HBCU?
Yes, I'm here.
Very good. All right. So I am ready whenever you are.
So think about the last time you had a family member or a close friend in critical condition, maybe even sometime this year due to COVID. They've tried all available treatments and their last resort is to enroll in a clinical trial. Now imagine they're a minority. How hesitant are they? Even more so because of legacy unethical trials, which COVID has exacerbated. Next. That's where the importance of cooperative community comes in. We need our Black and Brown neighbors to thrive instead of accounting for 21% of COVID deaths. Next. We know minorities are disproportionately devastated by COVID, yet critically underrepresented. And only represent 3 to 7% enrolled in clinical trials. Next. It's clear we need to break down barriers to build up trust, and now. So that's where we come to play. With Trust 5, we intend to launch a pharma and HBCU clinical study alliance. We consider this the best way to address the equity issue by connecting patients to others who have lived and understood shared problems. We know the best strategy is to make Black and Brown minority communities part of the study process, so we all have fair access to vaccines and preventative health. Next. Our first partner will be Merck. It's one of the biggest pharma companies, yet they're struggling to recruit minorities for trials. By establishing clinical partnership with Morehouse initially, we will be able to supply Merck with better data and increased impact from community stakeholders. Next. This is our roadmap. We're starting with Morehouse and Merck, and from there, we will expand to other HBC medical colleges. And then after that, our intention is to expand beyond the HBC medical system. Next. So our research tells us that large pharma companies simply aren't doing enough to reach minority communities in clinical trials. HBCU is going to offer domestic testing, targeting minority communities, and making decisions with representative stakeholders. Next. So let's think about the people who are missing from around the dinner table due to COVID-19 deaths. Nearly 40% are Black and Latino. Minorities deserve more equitable treatment. And with HBCU Trust 5, our combined experience shows we stand to deliver equitable solutions to drive the community forward together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Awesome. All right. The judges, please, your questions.
Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about how that conversation with Merck might go. So as you think of approaching a pharma and you have this really great opportunity and timing, which is so critical to most of the situations here in the innovation delivery space, how might that introduction to pharma look, and who might that sort of contact be? Would it be the clinical trials team? Would it be sort of the vaccine team? Maybe take us a little bit through that process.
Sure, yeah. I think on our end, our approach would be to start with the on the Morehouse side of things, and then once we've established that partnership and let them know, hey, this is what we're thinking, then we're going to move on to Merck from there. Once we have all our ducks in a row, essentially, and can pitch what the value will be to Merck, and what the shared value will be. More importantly, I think.
And are you pitching a platform that they would then implement, or is it more of a service that you provide?
I think it's more of a service right now. Certainly, we've discussed some technical or some tech implementations and deployments, but right now I think it would be a service, a partnership.
Yeah, and I think it's more of trying to encourage to make these HBCU medical college and universities like drug trial study sites. Because I think you would get more minority participation in these clinical trials if they see that these HBCU medical colleges and universities are actually participating in part of the process. When you see people that look like you, you're more apt to participate.
I like the going to the HBCUs to make them the stakeholder in this. Is it possible, Jesus, we could go back one slide? I want to ask a question. Yeah, so dealing with Merck and Moderna, when you say they do not target minority communities, do you have a root cause for that? Did you explore that? And what is how are you going to make them target minority communities? You got Morehouse and Tuskegee as partners for the clinical. How are you going to make them want to work with Tuskegee and Morehouse, aside from the fact that there's an NSF grant that's willing to fund it?
Well, I think Merck's current trial is they're in now. It's only in Belgium, so we can pretty much assume that they don't have much minority participation in that phase. Moderna, they are struggling to get increased participation. That quote that we had there at the beginning was from presidents of two HBCUs, Xavier and Dillard, where they had sent a letter trying to get increased minority participation. They themselves had signed up and had sent the letter to their faculty, staff, and students encouraging participation to participate in that particular study because they still need more minority participation in that particular study, even though it's in here stateside, an actual HBCU site. They were just hoping to get more minority participation since it was being promoted by HBCU presidents. But we were hoping that if you actually made an HBCU medical college or university an actual, I think that would have more of an impact than just it being encouraged by African Americans.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Another questions, judges?
No, just a comment. Good job. I think it's a kind of a unique idea to make sure that the HBCUs are front and center and that diverse researchers are front and center and have a seat at the table. So thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
All right. So if there are no more questions, thank you very much again, HBCU. And so that was team 6 for the judges. We give you a few moments so you can enter. Go ahead. All right. So, and the next is Pre-Solve, team 20.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. And so I am ready when you are, Brian.
All right. Hello, we are Pre-Solve Optimists, a combination of data and business professionals, and we are here to hack high blood pressure among African Americans. Next. This is Terry. Terry looks happy, but she's already having headaches on a regular basis because there's something that she doesn't know. Next. What Terry doesn't know is that she is months away from having high blood pressure, which will have a cascading negative effect on her health. Next. The American healthcare is failing African Americans with high blood pressure because it is optimized to react to acute illness instead of proactively promoting wellness. As a result, patients with preventable high blood pressure are not getting prioritized until their condition worsens, creating a downward spiral that profits from acute illness. Next. This is the root of the problem. We ignore precursors to illness. We wait too long to diagnose. We don't use the data that's right at our fingertips to predict high blood pressure. If you want to help Terry, we are a day late and $1 short. Next. Pre-Solve Optimist is creating an algorithmic dashboard that ingests data from patients' personal devices and merges it with traditional EHR sources, finds all the paths to health, including the preventative path, then actualizes the costs and financial incentives for each of the stakeholders in the ecosystem, making it evident and clear right in the clinician's diagnosis screen how to solve the problem in the way that makes the most sense for the patient, but also saves money. Next. So Terry might not have any idea that her present hypertension will turn into high blood pressure, but Pre-Solve's algorithmic method does know. By integrating her personal health data from trackers into the system,
Can you guys hear him?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I think we lost audio.
I was scared that it would have been me.
If that's how it is, I think I can.
Yeah, your audio has been really bad since the start, Brian.
Oh, I'm back. I'm sorry. My audio dropped. Okay. So
much better.
Things happen.
Okay, I'm gonna keep on going. So
Absolutely.
Terry might not have any idea that our present hypertension will turn into high blood pressure, but Pre-Solve's algorithm does know. by integrating her personal health data from EHR trackers, from personal health trackers. So we can wait 5 years until she is sick and treat her with drugs, or we can pre-solve the problem and get alerts by tracking the precursors to this disease with unbiased, inclusive machine learning. I treated my own condition and have kept myself off of blood pressure medication for over 5 years by using supplements like magnesium, nitric oxide, and exercise. So here's the conclusion. Next. Pre-solve will save so much money that it can be implemented for free. We can then collect a royalty based on the amount of savings it produces. And we can get more into detail with that in the Q&A. Value-based healthcare attempts to solve this problem with marginal success because the ecosystem is so complex. Pre-solve builds on the foundation by combining all the data into a reliably predictable way to mitigate the crisis of high blood pressure. We've got 4 stakeholders here, and we can help them all win. Insurance companies want lower claims, healthcare providers want more accurate information, pharmaceutical companies get a new stream of income with the supplements, and the individuals get a rebate on their premiums. Let's get serious about hacking racism in healthcare. Let's disrupt the status quo. We need to integrate all of the incentives for all the stakeholders in one place. Our powerful algorithm has incentives mapped with all these situations that makes everyone win. With pre-solve, with insurance companies, with healthcare providers, with pharma, with the general public, with our team, with your guidance, we can ameliorate the disproportionate and disadvantaged community of African Americans with high blood pressure. And we have the ability to turn this whole thing around. Together, we can turn the tide of racism in healthcare.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you very much. All right, judges, your questions, please. Hello?
I really want to hear what Corinne wants to ask, but maybe I'll take the first crack. I mean, I think the biggest question I have is just, really as you think of, I love the model. I think this, if you can figure this out for blood pressure, you really have, the sky's the limit. How do you, talk us a little bit through how you build out this predictive model here?
Right, so the predictive model is going to use something called deep scalable tensor network, but it's going to use sparse information. And what we'll do is we'll create profiles for each of the patients that we have in our ecosystem, and then compare their characteristics with the least amount of deltas. So I work for Humana, so we have all this information, demographic information about, for decades and decades of health information. And so we can easily build up a model and then begin to compare people's diagnoses based on their demographics. So this is the part that's unbiased and inclusive, is that we're going to be comparing African Americans to African Americans. We're not going to have them being compared to a large pool of people that are not closely related to their pre-existing condition. You can put me up against another male, same height, same age, same weight, like everything. But because I'm African American, I'm going to be predisposed to high blood pressure. My preventative treatments have to start earlier and be more aggressive in order for it to work.
So what? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, could I just as a sort of final follow-on, is this more of a baseline perspective, or is this something else? How are you thinking of it from the predictive capabilities?
When you say baseline perspective, can you explain
more? So would this be really around deviation of baseline from a healthy, or even from someone that's diagnosed, in order to build the predictability into it, or would this really be a population play from a prediction model?
I think it's a little bit of both. So you can put into the model the people that are really sick, but I think you also put into the model the people that don't develop a high blood pressure, in order to figure out what the thread is that kind of binds all the people who get chronic high blood pressure together. So that way you can understand what healthy looks like, you can understand what unhealthy looks like, and then understand what ties all the unhealthy people together. And I think that what you'll find is that, like for me, it was lack of magnesium in a week and a few days. I felt better. I stopped having headaches. I was able to kind of like, then I was able to exercise. And then I was able to add a little bit more supplements. And I don't have high blood pressure at all. So we're all the rest of my family, they're all on high blood pressure medication.
Thank you so much. Sorry, Corinne, go ahead, take it.
Thank you. This is really interesting. So a couple questions. So what data inputs do you think that you're using that make this unique versus other kind of predictors of high blood pressure? And also, since you're looking to kind of early warning signs, it requires you to build these longitudinal data sets, and people are changing insurances and using different healthcare providers. So what kind of data challenges do you envision trying to come up with the type of longitudinal record that you need in order to build a model like this?
Right. First of all, we have to, here in California, we have a law that says that your data belongs to you. So you should be able to have your data that you can basically, and it should be portable enough that you can kind of bring it to your doctor in a cohesive way. And so that kind of law needs to be replicated throughout the nation, so that, you know, once you have your health data, that you're able to bring it to every single physician that you see, no matter if you change, you know, 10 or 12 times, you should be able to bring your records with you in a way that makes sense for you. The second thing is, you know, we do need to be tracking people's sleep cycles. We need to be tracking their food that they eat. We need to be tracking a lot of things. And I think that it's a shift in the way we interact with physicians, that instead of going there when we're sick, you know, my physician should be calling me, you know, on a regular basis and saying, hey, I haven't done your blood work this year, or hey, I haven't seen you, you know, in 6 months, you know, because they know from the algorithm that I'm going to be at risk for hypertension than high blood pressure. They should be kind of following. They're going to get cues and reminders to follow up with me before I get to the point where I'm acutely ill. They're going to be following up with me when I'm at risk. I'm at risk when the algorithm says I'm at risk, and then they can check up on me. And so even if I don't have it then they're able to check up on me and say, okay, you're at risk. These are the things that you need to be doing in order to stay kind of like at a good, healthy level with your blood pressure.
Thank you. Other questions?
I like the proactive versus the reactive solution of your model. I love the fact that you guys put some economics, some dollars and cents to your presentation, right? And so on that, I'm looking at the insurance companies, right? You say the benefit to the insurance company are higher profit margins, right? So I own an insurance company and I'm happy with my profit margins. So can you explain to me how I'm going to see higher profit margins through this new approach?
For sure. So I work for Humana, and I can say that we're always trying to find ways to lower the cost of claims and increase profit, because it's a corporation and they're just focused on not only serving the members, but also making money. And if we can actually, it's in the best interest of Humana and most insurance companies to have members that are healthier and that live longer, because they're paying subscription, they're paying their premiums for longer, and there's less claims. So that's a no-brainer. That's the easiest lever to pull. The part that's going to is where it makes sense for everyone else, is that they're sharing those savings with the rest of the ecosystem. And that's what kind of value-based care is supposed to be doing anyway. It's supposed to be sharing that savings with the healthcare provider, but we're going to expand it so that it's shared with people who are paying the premiums. It's like with your car insurance. Like if you don't have an accident with some car insurance companies, then you get a rebate on your premiums. If you don't have any accidents, we're going to make it so that if you're keeping yourself healthy, if you're doing what your doctor says, then you're going to get a rebate on your premiums from your insurance company. And the insurance company like Humana, they're already on board with this kind of thing. They do it internally for us, and we get a rebate, thousands of dollars, if we follow our Health 365 goals. So we can expand this up and beyond just internal corporate plans and make this something that's available to everyone.
So are you saying that in addition to the model, you're actually proposing a different kind of value-based reimbursement plan, so almost an alternative payment model in addition to the predictive modeling piece that you're kind of changing how they're sharing the risk.
Right, exactly. So the predictive model is going to show the plan to preventative health as a first thing, but it also shows all the people in the equation how much they're going to save by doing the preventative path. So it's going to show the healthcare provider that, yeah, this person's going to come in to the hospital less, even though they'll come in for regular visits more, and they might have more blood panels being run. The cost of acute care is going to be completely different than if they were going to have episodic, treatment. For insurance companies, that's already evident. For pharmaceutical companies, they get a new stream of revenue. People are going to be coming to them for supplements. We can even make deals where, the supplements are automatically part of the plan, and then, those savings that we're getting from not having to do episodic care are going to be passed on in the form of, that deal being made with, Merck, or, basically think of it this way. Would you rather have supplements from almost everyone in the nation who is basically healthy but going to have these regular supplements, or have a very, very short window of having to treat someone with an acute illness, and your unique drug is only going to be unique until it's generic, and then you have to make another high risk R&D cycle in order to come up with some other drug. And that's kind of like what's broken about the pharmaceutical companies. But if we can get them off that kind of like boom and bust like risk that they're doing with these really unique drugs, we can get them on to like being able to make money from normal everyday supplements that everyone needs, rather than trying to make money off of people who are really, really sick.
All right. Thank you very
job.
much. Thank you very much.
One quick comment. Sorry to interrupt you, Jesus. Brian, I would just like to have you maybe give them your background, because if anyone can execute this, it's actually you. Just a really super quick 10 seconds about your background in data science and everything.
Sure. I was one of the first engineers at Pandora. I helped to build that machine learning algorithm. And then I did a lot of work for Army intelligence, naval intelligence, and then I moved on from that to work at NASA. And I worked at NASA for a while, doing really fun stuff like doing machine learning around all the space junk that's floating around our atmosphere. And then I moved on to Humana, where I'm really, really happy right now. And I'm a data engineer there.
Awesome. Great pitch, guys. Excellent job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we will have the judge deliberation. Yeah. And David, you wanted to say a few words.
Yes, absolutely. So I feel like I'm watching my children go off to college right now. It's so great. It's been such a great honor to work with all of you. Honestly, every team from our track, I've been blown away. I've watched you guys grow for the last 48 hours, work relentlessly. You guys you're all sleep deprived, and you still you pulled it off. And being an entrepreneur myself, I mean, I've been through this, and I also invest a lot. So I am blown away by the quality of the pitches and how quickly they came together with this caliber. So really commend you all. You did a great job tonight. You will sleep finally.